As you can see, we have started to work on the 3D level that is based on the 2D design. I have implemented the doors and keys, and I have also started working on an enemy and work towards the player. Now, the player has its issues with its movement, which I will go on to explain, but in other news, I also need to work on the weapon side of things because I believe that the weapon will be more involved compared to the 2D games version of firing the weapon. Now, the reason why lighting is turned off in the living room is because I wanted to test out getting the TV to emit light, and this is for the nighttime versions of the living room. This, of course, means that if I turned on the lights now, the TV would be too blinding. But as for this test, you can clearly see now that you can see the game very clearly shown, even without looking at it. And when you look at it, it disables your flashlight so you can see the game clearly. In terms of changes, there isn't really much to note about the game besides that everything is working the way they need to. Enemies, of course, take damage. Players also deal damage. The key doors all work, and of course, when you reach the end, you reach the next scene, which, if you can of course see, would be the 3D scene. Now, there are some minor things that I'll need to make changes of. One of the things that I've been highly trying to get right is the lighting, as usually materials would create a shine to them, and I want to keep them as accurate towards the 2D game as best I can without making it too dark. Anyway, in terms of the actual mechanics in this level, you can see that we have the simple platforming. Now, the main problem that I mentioned earlier, it has to do with how the player moves in my game currently. This is a problem that I will definitely fix in the future, as it's only kept this way for now due to the fact that I want to work on everything else and get it all sorted. And then I will work on cleaning the game and making sure that it all looks and works well. For instance, you can see that these floating platforms are actually the 2D sprite of the grass, the floating grass textures, except they're in 3D. This is done by Magic of Voxel, and what I did was I grabbed the initial 2D sprites and I spread them out and create a pattern for the top and bottom of the grass to allow it to look like floating grass blocks from the game, but in 3D. Now, as I was going to say, the issue. As of now, the game has it so that the player's movement is based on the camera. So, for instance, if I'm looking forward, he can move. But if I look down, he stops being able to move. Again, that's a problem I'll fix. But anyway, the enemy. So, the enemy decides to randomly follow any path that it so chooses to follow. And it can do this infinitely until the player gets in its view. If the player gets in its view, it will start to chase the player. If the player is able to escape it, it will go back to being an AI patrol. I dealt with many issues getting this right, and I can still make some changes to make it even better, because it has minor issues that I have. For instance, every time it wants to find a new spot, it moves while turning, and I may want to do something to make it more of a turn first, move next. But that's a problem that I'll have to think about later. The next issue that I did deal with was when the player collides with the enemy. Initially, the enemy does not like colliding with objects. It misses its AI, and it completely causes the object to mess up. What I've done is I've made sure that the object is kinematic and that the square currently does not collide with the terrain. Because for some reason, when the cube collides with things like hills and walls, it messes the AI. And again, as I mentioned, if I push against the enemy now, nothing happens. The enemy keeps pushing me. Which, of course, is something that I'll likely change, but that's for me to decide later in development. I believe that is all I have for my development updates. And I will continue, of course, to update on mechanics and stuff. And if I were to go onto the 3D game, we can showcase the enemy. Now, the enemy has these 3 scripts. It has an enemy FOV, an enemy AI, and the chase. It also has a patrol script, which basically it uses the AI to cause the enemy to follow a strict patrol pattern given by the points that I spread around the map. I have that disabled because I felt that having an AI that randomly walks would be more preferred, but again, it's there, so if I do want to make a patrol-based enemy, I can add it. Anyway, how it works is the enemy FOV creates a radius around the player's front cone of vision, and it also has its angle, of course, to allow it to be an actual cone instead of a full circle radius. What happens is, if the object that you selected to connects to the collision of the radius, it will go ahead and enable the can see player. And what happens is, if you can see the player, it goes ahead and enables chase enemy while disabling the enemy AI. Otherwise, AI is always on. How the AI works is that it connects to the NavMesh agent, which was added with the Unity Asset Store plus the new AI components found on GitHub, which I will try to link down below. And it follows the speed given by here. And what happens is the AI will pick random destinations that are from a distance of the walk radius that I give it to. And based on that, it can go ahead and find new spots to walk to with its speed. The chase is very similar to this, except all it does is it sets its destination to follow the object, being the player. And of course, it follows the speed. The 3D player uses the initial player controller script that I made some time ago, and again, I will make changes to make it actually better instead of having that weird camera look down, no being able to move problem. And again, I will continue to update the level and when I work on the planned sprint to art and modeling, I will, of course, upload them as either a video or screenshot onto my forum, which will then showcase the work of the enemy in Kiandor. And of course, I will continue to follow the planned sprint as best as I can. And if needed, I will perhaps update it during the mid sprint if I have any other tasks I would like to complete during the sprint. That will be all for this week. And again, I will update next time.